pick and choose and put it in the chat. So after the lecture, I want to kind of go through the notes that you yourself have put. All right. Okay. Now share screen. Okay, so okay, let's get started. Oops. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, Doctor.
All right, brilliant. So today's discussion, we're looking at how this particular novel. This is my thesis, at least in this lecture. I want to frame this text within its many contexts, and one of the contexts that I want to propose is that this novel both appropriates issues of diversity in this country, but also domesticates the language to the country, the English language, right? So I'm trying to cover both grounds. So very quickly, who is Tan Tuan In? He's from Penang, Malaysia, born in 1972, grew up in different places in Malaysia because his father was a banker and was posted in different locations. And then later, for his undergraduate, he pursued his law degree at the University of London. And then following that, he came back, worked for a bit, and then he pursued his master's degree, also in law at the University of Cape Town. So you have his background. You know he is somebody from law, right? And you see that echoes in his character. His character is also somebody who works within that profession in the Garden of Evening Mist. Very quickly also about this particular novel. So you notice I'm going to go straight into it. I don't want to contextualize his biography too much, but I'm going straight into this particular novel. So it's an award-winning historical novel. So that again already indicates, first of all, it's historical, but it's a revisioning of the history of Malaysia based on a particular author-defined social reality. So that's something else to kind of like keep in mind. It's historical, but based on the way the writer has appropriated history into prose, into fiction. So it was published in 2012, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in also 2012. He won the Man Asia Literary Prize in 2013. And in 2013 also, he won the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. And in 2014, he was in the top 8 finalists of the International Dublin Literary Award. So within 2 years of publication, the book has been very well received internationally. So that's the scene that I'm setting. And once you have this scene, later when we discuss the issue of domestication, you start to ask yourself, when the text is so heavily domesticated to the local landscape through its language, through its geographical, social, cultural elements, how is it well received internationally? What was it about the novel that allowed it to be so well received, right? So this is something to kind of keep in mind when the writer positions his text from a very much local perspective with the local issues, the local lingos, the language, the cultures. How is the text received internationally, right? So this is something we want to keep in mind. So the main question for today, which is also the main question for the e-task. So I'm going to begin with the end in mind. The end is for you for your e-task, for you to discuss what aspect of Malaysia is captured in this narrative. So except for Salim, everyone else, you will have your own take of how you saw, quote unquote, Malaysia, the country, the people, the culture, the history, everything, how you saw Malaysia captured in this fiction. For Salim, whatever you know of Malaysia based on your readings and exposures to Malaysia, you can address that. So like I said, I'm beginning with the end in mind. The end is, this is the e-task. So I'm going to start by telling you the question, and I'm going to show you how I saw various elements of Malaysia being appropriated into this narrative. You may see whether you agree, you disagree, and if you have other suggestions of how Malaysia is captured in this narrative, that kind of like, because it's unique to your experience of being Malaysian, you may be able to see something quite unique in this novel that I did not see, right? So is that all right so far?
Yes, Doctor.
All right, thank you so much. I'm trying to pace myself, because it's a quite a long lecture. So this is more for our non-Malaysian classmate to know where Malaysia is. So I'm hoping that our Malaysian population in class today does not need a reminder of what Malaysia looks like geographically. I'm just saying. So this is the map of Malaysia. So you have on the one hand, Peninsula Malaysia, Peninsula Malaya. This is the peninsula made up of various states. The novel is predominantly set within various locations in the peninsula, specifically Cameron Highlands, a little bit of Penang, but he also mentions Japan, Kyoto specifically at in certain sections, right? But predominantly he mentions some towns, right, in the peninsula. But Malaysia is also made up of two other states, Sarawak and Sabah. Previously, Singapore was part of Malaysia in 1963. It was Peninsula, Singapore, Sarawak, Sabah. Brunei was also included, but it was not, it didn't get through, the idea of putting Brunei as part of Malaysia in 1963. Then in 1965, Singapore chose to leave, become an independent republic. So what we are left with are the states in the peninsula, plus the state in Borneo, in the island of Borneo, which is Sarawak and Sabah. Okay, so this is a good map to start us off with, especially when you're reading the novel and tracking the journey, the various journeys that the narrator takes the reader through, specifically from Penang to Cameron Highlands and back again. So again, very quickly, snapshots of Malaysia, keeping in mind the topic for today is Malaysia and multiculturalism in the context of Malaysian literature in English, and how diversity is appropriated. So like I said, this is where our Malaysian students will be able to kind of share their own thoughts about how diversity in Malaysia is truly seen, right? Or not seen, or is it made invisible, So, you may find, Salim specifically, you may find this particular tourism website, Malaysian tourism website, of use. I looked at the photos and I was like, oh, can be nicer lah. Oh, it's so terrible. And
Yeah.
it's so sad.
The website itself is not.
Yeah, it looks very, very sad. So anyway, so when we look at the multi-ethnic landscape, okay, first of all, on the left, you look at the uniform, the school uniform, okay? So this is all girls context. You have the pinafores, you have the standard baju kurung, the national outfit. You have girls with hijab, but you also have Muslim girls not wearing hijab. You may also have non-Muslims wearing the baju kurung. So it is not, there's a kind of a slight level of diversity, right? But it's a uniform. So because of that, this is a secondary school context. You have the white top, either a blouse or a baju kurung, with a pinafore, a turquoise colored pinafore, or a long skirt. And those with the tie would be the prefect or the monitor of the school, the class, or something like that, right? And then you have the teacher there. So this is the way, and even within this classroom context, it's not very clear for a non-Malaysian specifically, but for a Malaysian, you will be able to see you've got students from various ethnic backgrounds, right? You've got maybe Chinese here, and maybe this is an Indian student perhaps, right? So non-Malaysians might not be able to discern this, but for a Malaysian, when you look at this picture, you can see the diversity, the cultural diversity, and perhaps even religious diversity. Not gender, because it's a all-girls school, right? So that's from the first picture. And from the second picture, an element of the multi-ethnic landscape, you have people from different backgrounds, and the outfits that they wear also represents different either tribe or ethnic community or racial, cultural background. Okay, and this particular man, for instance, you compare that to this second man, they are both covering their heads, but using different headgears, and that also indicates a different cultural, religious community, right? So you will see that element of multi-ethnic kind of diversification in this novel also. And the third picture would be how the ladies' traditional outfits are captured in this picture. Unfortunately, the two male models, their pictures got cropped. So, but we will focus primarily on these three ladies. So you have the lady on the left. She's wearing a traditional Indian outfit called the sari. You have the one in the middle. She's wearing, I'm assuming, a kabaya, because I can't see the front, whether it's a kabarong or a kabaya, can't really tell. But this is a traditionally Malay outfit of a particular part of Malaysia, right? So you've got, for those who are of Malay background, you will know that you've got baju kedah is different from baju pesak gantung, pesak pahang, and all that, right? So there's a lot of slight diversity within that, but this is being used. This outfit, kabaya, is being used as a representative of the Malay female's outfit, all right? And finally, this lady in red, she's wearing cheongsam, and it's again quintessential of a representation of the Chinese Malaysian woman's outfit, traditional outfit. So another picture of Malaysia's multi-ethnic landscape, right? So you've got three different representation, and finally. The reason I put this final picture here is because I was Googling for student population. I wanted to capture, because you've got on the left, the far left, the student population of a secondary school, a public secondary school, right? Government sponsored or government paid public secondary education. Form 2, it says here 2A, Form 2. And this is actually the picture of students in the tertiary education, higher education, undergraduates. So again, non-Malaysians might not be able to see the slight, the politics associated with this picture, if you like. But with Malaysians, we can see. So you've got maybe, I'm assuming this is a Chinese person, maybe a Malay, maybe an Indian person, So just looking at the picture, you see the cultural diversity. and these student population would be something that you will see in especially in university level in selected programs, right? So this is a kind of a snapshot of the multi-ethnic land of Malaysia. Another representation of Malaysia's diversity is also in terms of our religious diversity, and specifically that is symbolized through our places of worship. So, you have, for instance, in this, and these are all actual stamps, Malaysian stamps. In 2019, so I'm not going back to the 20th century for stamps. Stamps are still available, FYI, for those of us who didn't know, because I didn't know. Do we still use stamps now?
Yes.
So,
can I just share something though, Dr. Rai?
Yeah.
I wouldn't encourage anybody to send anything right now. I went to the post office last Friday. It cost me 50 ringgit to send a card to Australia. That's
yeah.
something.
And how long will that take?
I don't know, but I decided against it.
Yeah,
That's just because of the MCO right now. So
I see. Okay. So it's a current situation because
yes, worldwide.
Right. Okay. But I just want to show us how the multi-religious diversity of the land is being captured and celebrated in our local stamps, because this is also something very unique to a multi-ethnic, multicultural landscape like Malaysia, right? So you've got the Gurdwara Sahib place of worship. This is for the Sikh community, and this is for in Labuan. Labuan is for the purpose of Salim. Labuan is here, right? Where is Labuan?
Higher up.
It's near. I think it's near.
Just
Miri.
above KK, right?
Yeah, the other side.
So it's not listed, but Labuan is part of this state, part of Sabah. Okay, the Labuan is an island, is off the coast of this state called Sabah. So, this particular stamp, it is 80 cents, was produced in 2019, and it captures a particular place of worship. The next one, also 2019, is of a I think this is Buddhist. I'm not sure. Kuil Hong San Si in Kuching, Sarawak. I think it's Buddhist. I cannot be sure, either Buddhist or Taoist. I can't be too sure. And then you've got a church in Penang, St. George Church in Penang, which was set up in 1819. So again, it's a historical landmark in both in Malaysia as well as in the island of Penang. Then you have the Hindu temple, Srikati Kadirvel Murugan. Kadirvel Murugan
Mahaparasakti.
Okay.
Pachayaman.
This is in another state, which is in Perak. So you've got Labuan, which is part of Sabah. Then you've got another state, which is Kuching is the capital of Sarawak. Then you've got Penang, the island up north. And then you've got Perak, another state. And finally, you've got the Muslim place of worship, which is the masjid. But if you look at the architecture, it doesn't look particularly Malay or particularly similar to other mosques, right? That there is no dome, for instance, right? But this is a Muslim place of worship, and this is in Kelantan. So just to kind of recap, specifically for Salim, because I find that this is a Malaysian literature in English is an opportunity to introduce students, non-Malaysians, to both the land and the literary tradition. So you had Labuan, the first one, which was in Sabah. Then we had, what was the second one? Sarawak, Kuching. This is the capital, Kuching, capital of Sarawak. That was that other stamp. And you had the church, which was in Penang. Then you had, was it a Hindu temple in Perak?
Yeah, Taipei.
Yeah, this one. This is a Hindu temple. It not to mean that only this is the only one available in the entire country. No, you have places of worship for different ethnic, different religious background everywhere, everywhere in the different states. So Penang will have mosques, will have Buddhist temple, will have churches, will have Hindu temple, place of worship also. So the idea is to kind of say how Malaysia celebrates its religious diversity. This is the way we celebrate our cultural diversity through the things that we wear, both in a public institution like schools, as well as during celebrations. Yeah. And then this is through the stamps, our local stamps, right? Places of worship. And another one is the culinary, the way we celebrate our cultural diversity through cuisines. So for those who have not had lunch, I apologize if this salivates you a little bit, but yeah. So you've got thosai, which is an Indian bread made from rice flour, right? An Indian kind of pancake, not
crepe.
Crepes. Crepes. Yes. So it's very light, and it used to be eaten during for breakfast, but now it's also eaten for dinner, especially if you want
whenever you want it. 2 a.m. it's available.
Whenever you want it. So it's eaten with both. It's all vegetarian, okay? So you've got some kind of a gravy here. This is coconut gravy. This is curry, chutney, and this is like vegetarian, maybe cauliflower, stuff like that. So it's the beauty is this is not eaten by Indian people only. That's the beauty of all these dishes. It may be rooted in a particular culture, but it's not eaten by members of that community only, right? So, and this is, anybody want to guess what this is?
Rojak, is it?
right?
Rojak.
Gado-gado.
Yani rojak mi.
Pasambo.
This is rojak mi. This can either be gado-gado or pasambo. I think this is gado-gado.
Yeah,
So
gado-gado.
again, you have vegetables, tofu. What is sengkuang in English? Radish. You've got cucumbers, not finely chopped, and then you pick and choose, and then you use peanut sauce to kind of like a dressing, and you have that. This can either be eaten for breakfast, lunch, afternoon snack, so it's very healthy. And of course, the world famous Nasi Lemak. This is Nasi Lemak with sambal, quid. I'm salivating. Oh gosh, this is bad. So this is rice, and then you've got satay, right? Satay is basically chicken pieces, grilled over fire. You can either have chicken, you can have beef, and then you have, this is mi goreng mama, I think. Kenal ada kat situ kan. So this is fried noodles, but specifically if it's northern style fried noodles, they will put peanut, desiccated peanut, crushed peanut to kind of give it that flavor. So again, it's representative of a particular cultural community, but it is not eaten nor prepared by a particular community anymore, right? So this is how culturally Malaysia is diverse through our cuisines. And finally, I think this is the last one. Another aspect of Malaysia's multicultural landscape that can be seen in our land is through the language that we use in our public domain, right? So, for instance, just take this. So it's danger. Basically, this you don't enter this space. Danger. You've got the word is written in English. You've got the word written in Malay, bahaya. You also have the Chinese script. You have the Tamil script. I'm not sure what's at the bottom here. The same with no smoking sign. You've got the Malay signage, dilarang merokok, and then you've got the Chinese one. And likewise here, no admittance. It's written in English. It's got the Malay signage also as well as the Chinese. This one I'm not sure. This is Tamil, but this one I'm not sure. Is this partly Chinese also? I mean, or is this the whole thing is Chinese? I can't be sure. And then this one, the middle picture, this is a shop lot, somebody's shop lot. The same with this second picture. So this is something you will find in Ipoh, in maybe Negeri Sembilan, in Seremban, in Malacca, also in Penang, where the shopkeeper will have this signage for his shop, both in Malay, in Chinese, but also in Jawi, in the scripts, the Jawi scripts, but also which is a Malay version lah, right? Declaring the name of the shop. Again, here this is another shop lot. You've got the name of the shop written both in the Romanized version, the Chinese script, the Jawi script, the Tamil script. So this is how multilingualism is being celebrated in Malaysia, in our landscape. So given all that, I'm just going to take a 5 minutes break to kind of come back to our Malaysian students and ask them, how is Malaysia captured, you think? How is it captured in your own mind, in your everyday experience? This is just give me 5 minutes to drink water. Go on, who wants to go first? How is Malaysia's diversity captured, you think? Do you see Malaysia's diversity when you step out the door, wherever you live? When you step out, when you go into the public domain, do you see Malaysia's diversity, or do you think this is your space is predominantly monocultural?
If I can just share my childhood, isn't it sad that I have to go back to my childhood? Because I was raised in Kelantan, and it was very multicultural. I think even now lah. I live in a small town called Kuala Krai, and my first friends were actually Chinese, because in the residential area, and then when I grew up, I went to boarding schools, and sadly, a lot of governmental boarding schools were mainly Malay, especially Sekolah Agama, obviously. And then I went to UiTM ages ago, so that was also not fun. So in terms of multiculturalism, as an adult, it's not something that is given to me. I had to work on it consciously. So, I made the conscious decision to not join Malay-dominated companies because I don't prefer it, if I can just be honest with you. And of course, to make friends, to join activities, NGOs and whatnot. So I have to do it because my family is not used to diversity, except when it's work, But generally, my cousins or most of their friends are Malays. So that is my experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I think mine is somewhat similar to Ruby in terms of, but I'm glad that my dad chose to send me to convent school, so I met a lot of different races there. And I remember my first clique consisted of the other races, Indian and Chinese, and it was, for me, it was a fantastic moment because the Chinese could speak Indian and the Indian could speak Chinese language and vice versa. But of course, being a convent girl, our main language would be English. But then when I transferred to my high school, it's predominant. It felt like a plural society somewhat because even though there's multi races in that school, we are segregated in terms of like the
Class.
people we choose, yeah, in terms of class, and the people we choose to hang out during recess. But there are a few multiracial friends that I've met, and those are the ones I stay in contact until today. Like that's my effort to make sure that I have friends from different races as well.
All right. Thank you, Amy. And anyone else?
As for me, if I can think of anything on top of my head, is whenever I accompany my grandma, my nini, to the morning market, there are a lot of the sellers from different ethnic backgrounds, and how they talk to each other, how they talk to the customers is very Malaysian.
Right.
It's like we're one community, even with different races. Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, Alia. Anyone else?
It's kind of, I don't know. It's a bit of a funny story for me because my dad, he's of a bit mixed. His grandmother was Chinese, so he took most of the. He looked pretty very much Chinese.
Sorry, Lisa. Who again?
My dad.
Oh, your dad. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know what, but people say that I look Sarawakian. I don't know what Sarawakians look like, but they say my teachers often told me that I look Sarawakian. For some reason, I get that's what you get for mixing so many mixes, right? After so many mixes, but when my dad go out, for some reason he speaks Malay. He speaks English normally, quite normal. But whenever we go out and there's a tauke at the store, right, it's always Chinese. His English becomes Chinese English, Chinglish. So, but before he even walks into the store, the Chinese talkie speaks Chinese to him very fast. So it's like he told me, and he didn't tell the guy that he was Malay. So, but he spoke in Chinese, still in Chinese English, and he sounded like he was so convincing. And then the other guy also replied in Chinese English because he thought he was Chinese. He got a discount. And ever since then, I think that's how he went around whenever he saw other Chinese other Chinese talkies. So I think it's quite funny lah when I heard it.
Language became the means for him to communicate. All right. Thank you so much, Lisa. Anyone else?
I think for me, because my late grandma's best friend is she's a Chinese, but we call her as Mek Bungo. She has a not a Malay name, but like more of a nickname. So they've been friends for like, I don't know, since I wasn't even here. So yeah, and up until school, because mostly I'm in the city, so I've always had friends up until my colleagues are all Chinese mostly. But now that you mention it, Lisa, you do look like Sabahan a bit, I think. Yeah. What else? Yeah, my great grandfather was an Indian. You can see bits and pieces of him in my mother's siblings. Yes. Yeah. So that's for me.
Okay. Did I miss anybody? Who else? Dr. Mel, do you want to share your experience? Not just as a student of the subject, but also being part of the landscape. Yeah.
My multicultural experience, is it? I think it's been defined in my school and my family as well, because we live in, as I mentioned, I live in a village, in middle of KL. I mean, it's from KLCC in a sense, but it was very much a multicultural, multi-religious. Within a 1 kilometer radius, there's a chapel, there's a surau madrasah, there's a gurdwara, and so it was a very interreligious and multicultural experience. Because in a sense the communities all live together in a neighborhood, so it's very peculiar. I don't know if anybody realized recently there was this big furor about Hannah Yo, right? Visiting a masjid, but
Wearing to
yeah,
the
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I grew up with the elders of the madrasah and the masjid being present at our church celebrations, because it was part of their way to respect and also communicate with the parents. So it was very young. And just to go back a little bit as well from that colonial heritage, is that I also grew up with a French parish priest. So like from my earliest, in the formative years, the parish priest was French, who spoke Cantonese, Hokkien, Malay, Tamil, very, very fluently. So that itself made me feel, very unique,
yeah.
and I think the most pronounced element of that multicultural mindset that I possess is when you move abroad, and you realize that people that are of the same so-called ethnicity, when there are other Indians abroad, are different from you purely because you are multicultural mindset. And I find myself being drawn to Bruneians, Singaporeans, Indonesians, more than from people from, say, Pakistan or India or Sri Lanka. And I could only bring that to the fact that all these things that Dr. Rahana mentioned, that interreligious experience, that multicultural palette, even if you want to hang out with a group of friends, we're so used to having different times, we eat different things. Because if you hang out with a bunch of Indians, all they want to go and eat Indian food all the time. And I feel that really defines that. And then your taste in music, your taste in entertainment, right? You're drawn to music from different cultures. And I think that all comes from that completely being multicultural, true and true. So that's just my reflection.
Thank you, Dr. Mel. I just have a bit more to share before we take a 10-minute break. So I'm going to continue. Salim, did you want to say anything? Did you want to share anything about your experience?
Yeah, Dr. Rai, I'm interested if there's multiculturalism where Salim is from.
No, I'm more interested about how he sees Malaysia's multiculturalism.
Okay.
Meaning, as an outsider, when you come to this land, do you see multiculturalism or do you see homogeneity? So that's the kind of thing I would like to know, his impression. Salim? Sorry, is Salim in? Salim, are you speaking?
We cannot hear you, Salim.
Okay, but if you could just chat, drop us a chat in the chat box, that would be great. Because it looks like you're speaking. It looks in the chat column. Sorry, in the icon looks as if you're speaking, but I can't hear anything. Yeah, it's okay. No problem. So I'm just gonna go a little bit more before we take a 10-minute break. So where did we stop? Yeah. So I just want to start looking at the context now, and how that context of multiculturalism, multilingualism, multi-religious Malaysia is now captured in a particular text, Tan Tuan Eng's The Garden of Evening Mist. Okay, so the next couple of minutes, I just want to show us how this particular text, this novel, is framed within specific context. The first context is the history of Malaya, as well as later Malaysia, as well as the second context, which is cultural diversity. So the first context is our history. The second context is the diversity, cultural diversity of the land. Okay, so you've got two contexts. So very quickly, the text, you know, this particular novel, what is the plot, who are the main characters, what's the theme. This is just generally, again, you will have your own take to it. So in terms of a timeline of the narrative, so it starts from 1938 right up to mid 1980s, right? So around plus or minus around 50 years time span. So it starts with the first context historically, the first context 1938 to 1940, Malaya as a British colony. Then 1941 to 1945, that's when the Japanese invaded Malaya and occupied Malaya during Second World War. 1945 to 1951, Malaya was a British colony. Something else happened during that time, 1948. The communist insurgents in Malaya, after the Japanese left, caused Malaya to experience a particular episode in our history, which is emergency. And that lasted for about 12 years, 1948 to 1960. But in the same time, in 1957, Malaya received its independence, 1957 here. But Malaya was still experiencing the tail end of emergency. In 1963, Malaysia was formed. 1965, Singapore left Malaysia to form its own independent republic. And the story continues, this particular novel continues from 1963 to 1980s. Something happened, and then mid-1980s, something else happened. So the first, the top part is the historical context of Malaya and then later Malaysia. This is the timeline, the year or the decade. And this is the plot, what was happening at this time. So 1938 to 1940, the central character, Teo Yun Ling, and her family goes to Kyoto to spend the holiday there. And there they visited the gardens in Kyoto. And when Yun Ling, the central character, has a flashback about this time of her life, she talks to the person who was seminal in the formation of the Emperor's Garden, which is Aritomo, because he was the Emperor's gardener. So there's a kind of an overlapping between what's happened in the past and later after the Japanese leaves and when Yun Ling meets Aritomo in Malaya. 1941 to 1945, a very tragic thing happens for the Teo family. Two of their daughters were taken prisoners. Yun Ling and Yun Hong, they were taken prisoners by the Japanese, taken to the intern camp somewhere in the jungles of Peninsula Malaya. All right, so like I said, Cameron Highlands was a very important location. If you go back to the map, if you have your notes, the lecture notes, that will be useful. 1945 to 1951, after the Japanese surrenders and Yun Hong and the other prisoners die in the camp, Yun Ling is set free. Oh no. Yun Ling, not Yun Lin. Okay, I will check that. So when Yun Ling escapes the intern camp, she starts her journey of retribution, right? She seeks justice for those who were ill-treated by the Japanese. She works with the War Crimes Tribunal. She also then goes on to study law at Cambridge. She then becomes the deputy public prosecutor until she's sacked. Then she comes to visit Cameron Highlands. When she comes to visit Cameron Highlands, she meets with Aritomo in Cameron Highlands. And Aritomo was the emperor's gardener. So it kind of like comes full circle, you know. She visited Kyoto when she was a young girl, and she experiences torture in the hands of the Japanese soldiers in the Japanese intern camp. And then she goes on to study law. She becomes a deputy public prosecutor. And when she's sacked, she comes back to Cameron Highlands, almost the same location where her trauma is rooted in geographically, and meets the person who created the Emperor's Garden. The garden plays an important role in this narrative, you know, as you will explore. So Aritomo is symbolic of various things. It's symbolic of Japan, symbolic of what was beautiful about Japan that Yunling remembers, and what was also important for Yun Hong throughout her experience in the camp. She used that image of the garden and kept recollecting it and hoping someday to be able to kind of create her own garden, but she never got around to it. And Yunling then took on that ambition, that aspiration, to set up a garden in Peninsula Malaya. So during this 1948 to 1960, as the communists were taking the space that was left by the Japanese and creating a kind of a focus, a secondary focus, if you like, you know, outside of the colonial experience, giving the Malayan people a kind of a focus, right? Because of the communist insurgency in Malaya. Malayan people didn't just have the colonialists to deal with, but they also had the Communist Party of Malaya to deal with. And they were either afraid of the communists or they were part of the communist movement. So the Malayan people had to deal with that as well. And Yunling also had to deal with that directly. And it was during this time too, Aritomo teaches Yunling how to develop a Japanese garden, or how to the art of Japanese gardening. She wanted to create her own garden, but she never got around to it. That was in the 1950s, right? And then Aritomo disappears. Then 1963, Yunling goes back to KL. 1963 to 1980, she becomes a Supreme Court judge. At the same time, Malaysia was formed. Yunling retires due to her ailment at the age of 53, and then she comes back to Cameron Highlands to write her memoir. So again, there's a kind of a full circle movement going on. And she suffers a particular ailment, which I think is also an important theme in this story. Aphasia, which is suffered by Yunling, causes her to lose her memory. So in the novel, in page 33, there is a quote, and I quote here: "For what is a person without memories? A ghost, caught between worlds, without an identity, with no future and no past." So early on in the story, the narrator kind of suggests to you that memory is an important aspect. The things that happened to you in your past, which is what ultimately memories are, this is an important aspect of you, your identity. Because if you don't have that, what are you left with? You're just a ghost, caught between the two worlds, without an identity, with no future, with no past. So as we take a short break, I want to leave you with this question. How far do you agree with this, that it's your memories that help define your sense of identity? Without your memories, you personally, you as individuals, without your memories, you are without an identity, with no future and no past, right? You are like a ghost. So I want to leave you with this question. So when we come back, we will take that discussion through. But have a think of it as you take your 10 minutes break and come back with some ideas to share. Okay, so I'm going to stop here.